Hello lovely people of the world, my name is Justin and welcome to our YouTube channel Love Withstanding. As I mentioned in my previous solo video, I told you guys that I met with my sister for the first time in 7 years, which is the first interaction with her of any kind. And it's not by my choice. Every time I go over to my parents' house, they always tell me that my sister is sleeping locked away in her bedroom. Whether I go there at 11 in the morning or at 4 in the afternoon, it's always the same story. I never had text messages or phone calls or anything of that sort for the past 7 years. I could not even be sure if she's alive or not. As far as I know, she doesn't have her own cell phone. Between the 3 adults living in my parents' house, they only have one cell phone and it's a flip phone from 2005. But you don't need to be stuck in 2005. You can get a great deal on premium wireless service from our partner Mint Mobile. For as little as $15 a month, you can be on the nation's largest 5G network with unlimited talk and text and your choice of 5 GB of data or unlimited data for a small surcharge. They are on T-Mobile 5G network, so you're not sacrificing coverage or speed. That means you can watch YouTube videos and make video phone calls on the go. Mint Mobile doesn't have brick and mortar stores, so they can pass the savings on to you. Scan the QR code or click the link mintmobile.com/lovewithstanding to make the switch. Or if you already made the switch, let me know in the comments. You can make the switch to Mint Mobile in less than 15 minutes if you have eSIM compatible phone, or you can get Mint Mobile SIM mailed to you. They also got great modern family plans to save you even more money. My sister and I used to be close when we were younger. I used to look up to her. I remember this one time when I was about 5 years old, my sister and I decided to go explore the neighborhood. This was back in Korea. I remember following every footstep she took as we were walking into other people's yards and looking around. I was scared because everything looked new and different, but I knew as long as I stayed close to my sister, I'll be okay. In reality, she probably had no idea where she was going either, nor knew how to get back home. In one of the backyards, there was a big tree, the biggest I've seen until that point in my life. It's the kind of tree you see in Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. We named it Monster Tree. I have many fond memories of my sister growing up, and it's really sad that our lives took a different turn somewhere down the road. I have some hypotheses on what led to different lives, but I won't go into that in this video. I might do a dedicated video on that topic later. Please let me know in the comment section if you'd like to see that video. In the morning of March 30th, 2023, I got a call from the landline of my parents' house. But I missed the call because I was in the middle of unloading my girls at their day home. When I got back home, I decided to dial my parents' landline. I assumed my dad will answer the call since he's the only one who ever talks to me over the phone. My dad's surgery was scheduled for March 28th. That's 2 days prior, so I assumed he came back home after the surgery. When my call was answered, it was my mom on the phone. I was surprised and thought, did something happen to my dad? She asked when I was coming over to drop off the kids before going to the hospital to deliver our baby. I said, I don't know yet. Then she said my dad almost died after the surgery. His blood pressure was very low and he had to get blood transfusion. Mom was transporting meals to the hospital and handing it to my sister at the lobby because my dad couldn't eat any of the hospital food. Turns out my sister had been staying at my dad's bedside for the last 2 days in the hospital. I was relieved to know that he's at least alive and recovering. I asked my mom what his room number was, but all that she knew was that they're on the 8th floor. Mom was insisting that I don't visit him, especially because my sister is there. Then she changed the subject back to the kids. She was surprised that we are not delivering our baby today, the 30th of March. She said babies are usually born on the day doctors tell you. Now it was my turn to be surprised because she's a mother herself. She went through 2 births in her life, but thinks that baby delivery date is an exact science. I told her that my sister-in-law took a vacation week so that she can watch the kids. My mom was relieved to hear that because she didn't know how to make that work when she had to drive to the hospital to deliver food. So it seemed that my dad didn't relay that information to my mom. After being hung up the phone, my wife called the hospital to find out the room number that my dad was staying at. Initially, she identified herself as Sarah, then the receptionist came back and told her that the patient doesn't know anyone by that name. Then my wife clarified that her husband Justin will be visiting. Then the receptionist came back and gave us the room number. My wife insisted that she's not having any contractions, so she doesn't feel that she's going into labor anytime soon. That afternoon, after wolfing down my lunch, I drove over to the hospital where my dad was staying. When I got to the hospital, I paid for 90 minutes of parking at the parking meter by the entrance. As I entered the lobby, there was someone handing out a surgical mask, so I put one on and continued my way to the elevator. After the elevator door opened on the 8th floor, there was another door that was locked, and I had to get buzzed in by a staff. But I saw a janitor pushing a cart and swiping her badge to open the door. I got behind her and walked through the door. I walked past all the staff acting like I know where I'm going. I found the room number and saw the door was open. Through the doorway, I saw my dad wearing a hospital gown, sitting on a chair looking down at his feet. He looked pale and weak. My sister was sitting next to him, shoulder to shoulder, looking towards the doorway. As I was slowly approaching them, I heard my sister say, "이게 누구야?" meaning, "Who's this guy?" Dad looked up at me and verbally acknowledged me by saying, "Oh," followed by, "No, what's up?" meaning, "You came?" He had his winter jacket draped over his shoulders. When I was within arm's length from him, he poked his right hand out from underneath his jacket as to shake my hand. I gave him a firm handshake. Then I looked over to my sister and extended my hand in front of her. She was slouching back in her chair, hands in stippling position, resting on top of her abdomen like a Bond villain, and locked eyes with me and repeated, "Who's this guy?" and let out a subtle laughter. I lowered my surgical mask down to my chin to reveal my face. She said, "모르는 사람이 와서," meaning a stranger is here, all the while keeping her hands in stippling position. I pulled my hand away. I recognized that she's making a kind of power move and not shaking my hand. I sat down at the foot of the bed, facing my dad and sister. I pulled my surgical mask back on because my dad probably has lowered immune system and I want to protect him. My dad began telling me a story of what happened after waking up from his surgery. He was transported to his recovery room and he was about to get up from his wheelchair to lay down on the bed. He felt lightheaded and passed out. Then all the sirens went off and the room was filled with medical staff. My sister added, "He doesn't remember any of that." She continued the story. She said more than 10 people rushed into this room, even medical students who were standing at the back of the room jumping up and down to see what's going on. Dad's eyes were rolled back, his mouth frozen in crooked position, fingers and toes stiff and curled in. Medical staff eventually resuscitated him back to life, and my dad remembers waking up to a room full of people. My sister said Angel of Death was in the room waiting to take his life. But now that my dad is still alive, he might just try to take you instead. I had a look on my face that says, "Are you serious right now?" I couldn't tell whether she was joking or taking a jab at me, somehow wishing that I wasn't around or even dead. I didn't respond to the comment other than with my blank stare. Then my dad interjected, "When times are dire, some people start to think about angels and whatnot." I asked if the surgery went okay. He said they don't know yet. They need to monitor him further to see whether the surgery was successful. My sister asked me why I'm not at the other hospital for the labor of my baby. I said, "It doesn't look like it's going to happen today." She was confused by the statement. She asked, "Didn't doctors say it's today?" I said it's not an exact science, it's only an estimate. I asked if she had seen the photos of my daughters. She said no. I turned to my dad and asked if he had shared the photo albums with her. He froze and said, "What album?" He was pretending he doesn't know about the albums I sent him. I took my phone out of my pocket and started flipping through the photos of my daughters while holding the phone facing towards my sister. She said, "You're like a typical dad." I asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "You're showing photos of your kids to everyone." After looking at a few photos, my sister's first comment was, "They look Filipino." I showed her the family portrait. She said, "Something doesn't look right." I asked, "What do you mean?" She pointed at my face in the photo and said, "This doesn't belong here. Rest of the photo makes sense, but this face doesn't belong here." I recognize she's trying to insult me like a schoolyard bully making a distasteful comment about your physical appearance. But it was easy for me to keep my composure because I knew that she's probably envious of my family. I asked my dad when he would like to visit his first grandson. He said he will figure that out when he's discharged from the hospital. I turned to my sister and said, "When would you like to meet your nieces and nephew?" She responded with, "What are their Korean names?" I told her their Korean names. She said, "I'm going to call them by their Korean names. If they don't respond, I'm going to yell at them. If they don't speak Korean, I'm going to yell at them." I said, "They barely speak English." She asked, "What am I even going to talk about with your kids?" It seems that she doesn't know how to interact with a 2-year-old. She wants to know what topics or conversations are appropriate when talking to a baby. It never crossed her mind that making funny faces or asking what color is your shirt is something she could do with a 2-year-old. I asked Dad, "When do you think Mom will be able to meet her grandson?" He said, "Your mom has shingles, so she won't be able to meet him." At one point, my sister paused and had a puzzled look on her face. She said in Korean, "Have you been talking to me in English or Korean?" I said, "I've been responding to you in English, but speaking in Korean to Dad." She said, "Talk to Dad, I gotta hear this." I continued my conversation with my dad in my broken Korean. Then my sister interjected and said in Korean, "You don't speak Korean." My sister and my dad has been speaking Korean to me since I got there. I would respond to my dad in Korean, but I would respond to my sister in English. All through high school years and college years, my sister and I have been speaking exclusively English. And my last memory of interacting with her 7 years ago, we were both speaking English to each other. So it's a normal behavior on my part to only speak English to my sister. Then my sister asked, "Why don't you talk to me in Korean, but you talk to Dad in Korean?" I said it's because it's easier for me to speak English. I asked, "Are you afraid somebody is listening on us? Is that why you don't want me to speak English in here?" She said, "I don't acknowledge people unless they speak Korean to me." I responded, "That's fine. I won't acknowledge you either. I'm just going to talk to my dad." Then I physically shifted my position to face towards my dad. My dad sensed tension in the room and he immediately tried to change the subject. I think she recently developed some kind of a superiority complex where she would see people who speak Korean as her equal, but look down on people who don't speak Korean. That's a new side of her that I didn't see 7 years ago. I noticed an electric kettle sitting on the floor in one corner of the room. I asked about the kettle. Dad said they brought it over because he couldn't drink anything cold, so he's been mixing hot water with orange juice. My sister said Dad is supposed to drink lots of fluid as per doctor's order. She said, "Since you're here, why don't I order you around? Grab the kettle over there, fill up Dad's cup halfway with hot water and top it off with orange juice from this carton of juice." I didn't appreciate how she said she's going to order me around. But I got up from my seat and got my dad his drink. I got his drink because he needed it, not because my sister phrased it that she's going to order me around. Then the family flip phone that my sister had started to ring. My sister answered it. It was Mom calling. My sister told Mom that I'm currently visiting them. I spoke to Mom briefly and handed the phone back to my sister. After a brief conversation with Mom, they ended the phone conversation. During our conversation, I continued to remind them of how much time I have left before my parking time expires. I tried to extend the parking time from my phone app, but it seems that I couldn't extend the existing parking session from my phone app because I started the parking session from the physical machine by the entrance. When I had only about 40 minutes remaining on my parking session, my sister insisted that I go home early before the parking session expires. I said I still have plenty of time to talk. When only about 20 minutes remaining in my parking session, a nurse walked in to check on my dad. She asked how much he had to drink. My sister answered, "Dad couldn't drink much because he's here," pointing finger at me. She continued, "Dad was busy telling stories, so he couldn't drink much." My sister was trying to assign blame to me. So I decided to interject. I said, "He drank cup and a half since I got here about an hour ago." Nurse was pleased to hear that my dad drank a cup and a half. Nurse was there to collect urine sample from dad. While he went to the washroom to collect the sample, it was just my sister, myself, and the nurse in the room. The nurse attempted to make a small talk with us by asking, "Are you guys in town?" I answered yes. She asked, "Have you always been living in the city?" I answered, "We've been in Calgary for the last 30 years. The nurse responded, "I'm fairly new here. I'm originally from Saskatchewan." Then my sister went on an inappropriate rant about how Saskatchewaners are infecting the city with spread of their green license plates. I did an imaginary facepalm in my mind and tried to change the topic back to my dad's condition. The nurse said she'll need to do a scan on my dad, so I thought it was a good time for me to head out. I hugged him and said goodbye. As I was walking out of the room, I turned my upper body halfway towards the room and waved at my sister without making eye contact. I said, "See you later," in English. I didn't hear anything from my sister, so I continued my way out of the room. On April 2nd, which is 3 days later, I called my parents' landline. By the time my son Jaden was already born, my dad picked up the phone. I told him that I'm glad that he's discharged from the hospital and recovering at home. I mentioned the baby is born and he's at home with me. I said, "When the baby is about 3 weeks old, I would like him to visit." He declined to make any schedule of such, citing that he wants to focus on his recovery. He seemed eager to end the phone conversation as soon as possible. He kept asking, "Is that everything that you want to talk about?" So eventually I answered, "Yes, that's everything." And he hung up the phone without saying goodbye. To me, it sounded like he's offended that I dared ask him about meeting my grandson while he was still recovering from the surgery. And that's where we stand. I have not had any interaction with my parents since the phone call on April 2nd, 2023. I get the feeling that we're making a step backwards after making a monumental breakthrough a few months ago. Mom is declining the opportunity to see her grandkids, citing her shingles as a reason, and that she doesn't want to pass it on to the kids. That is very similar to her declining to see her grandkids during the height of COVID pandemic because of their advanced age. Dad is using the recovery from the surgery as a reason why he can't see the grandkids. I feel like my parents are regressing to the state where they had no interaction with their grandkids. I'm still going to make more attempts at having my grandson have some kind of interaction with his grandparents, but I'm going to give them some time to themselves for a while. After having my first interaction with my sister, I think I understand why my parents were trying so hard to keep me from seeing my sister. They were aware of how my sister tends to make inappropriate comments like, "This face doesn't belong here," or "Angel of death might take you instead," or "I'm gonna yell at the kids if they don't speak Korean," or "I'm not gonna acknowledge you unless you speak Korean to me." So my parents were anticipating a fight between me and my sisters, so they were trying to keep us separate. When I was in my 20s, I would have definitely been triggered by her comments. I would be pumping my chest up and scream, "How dare you say that to me?" But now I have understanding of her situation and she's projecting her frustration through those comments. Instead of getting angry at her, I feel pity for her. In my opinion, I don't think my sister is ready to meet my kids. She might actually yell at my kids for not speaking Korean, and that could be traumatizing to my kids. My approach is to have my parents interact with my kids, and over time, that could influence my sister's mindset. That is the end of today's story time. Please give this video a like and subscribe for more on our continuing saga of love withstanding. Until next time, take care of one another and I'll see you in our next video. Bye!